Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the Recyard every Wednesday night. Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday night, and we are live on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Toonchie.
Hey, Toonchie. That was kind of a sad little intro.
Honey, my shoulder's killing me.
I'm sorry.
I just want to cry.
Guys, Toonchie is in pain. Toonchie's shoulder is out of there. It's tough being 45, honey.
Hey, 44 for another month. Now, I want to tell everybody how I heard this, and if I did last time, well, I'll tell you the same story like my dad does me. I reached back one day to get my seatbelt, and it kind of pinched, and I was like, damn, that hurt. It has progressively, and I didn't ever reach back like that ever again, right? It has progressively gotten worse, Marci. And
what you're telling me is you damaged your shoulder putting on your seatbelt. Is that what I'm hearing?
I feel like maybe that was the pinnacle of overuse or whatever I had done to it. I just finished it off, I guess. And I don't know what I need, but I am in chronic pain that makes me tired. I'm tired from it.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you're hurting that way. I truly am. You're exhausted because your shoulder, and I'm exhausted because I live with a 9-month-old baby who's cutting new teeth. So, so you guys are in for a treat tonight. And actually, we are talking about some serious things that are happening in this country right now, and that is the Unmarked Graves, 215 bodies discovered behind a jailhouse in Mississippi. 215. So we have quite a show for you guys tonight. But before that, let's see if I can do it real smooth. Hey, Toonchie, let's do a weekly recap. Oh, Tooch.
That was pretty smooth. I feel like. Do you want to do your weekly recap first while I try to remember what I did last week?
I'm trying to think about what I just fed the kids for dinner. This is what has my week been, which we have had some things going on.
Honey, you did the parole webinar, the parole teaching.
Oh, yeah. Yes, the National Parole Transformation Project has come to Texas, and we have been meeting and working on how we can change parole, transform parole in this state. And it's a lot of organizations. We're trying to, anybody in Texas that's working on parole related issues, as in legislation, that type of thing, we're trying to pull it all. Let's join forces and make some changes in Texas. And actually, we had that webinar, and it was really great.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was excellent. It was, you had people of different experiences, and then, different angles with policy from different folks that have actually worked on policy. So, I think it's the beginning of building a real coalition with all of the organizations and individuals that are working on parole. So I was very pleased with it.
Yeah, I think it went great. And I think it's just baby steps, right? Like change starts with conversation. And that was some big time conversation about what needs changed and how do we go about what our next steps are. And I'm excited to see where that goes. And other than that, I feel like, and if I'm forgetting something, there's just no telling, but I feel like I've just been in mommy mode. And can I tell you something? You know, I went to prison when my youngest daughters were in diapers, and my nephew that we have now is pretty close to the age that my youngest daughter was. Wesley was 9 months, Lily was 8.5 months. So they're the size and the feel, and and then even just playing with the 6-year-old, wrestling with them and loving him up and tucking him in, it feels really strange. And I have to keep reminding myself, like, there's for sure guilt, like that I didn't get to do that. Like, my kids didn't get this part of me, And so there's for sure that, but I have to keep telling myself that it's how we give back, right? Because while I was gone, people were loving up my kids. But it's an emotional kind of uh, it's something going on in there. Maybe I need to talk to my therapist about it, but it feels it's a strange feeling. But our days are so full, like school buses and backpacks, and I just haven't done that in so long. It seems so crazy that this is our life right now. Uh, but yeah, that's what we've been doing, and I finally figured out, I think this week, how to work and manage everything else.
Mhm.
I'm kind of getting back into that groove. Last week was a mess, but I think this week has gone better. And I've posted some videos for those of my folks that have been sending me private messages. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just so busy and I haven't figured out. I mean, I think that one day I didn't even figure out how to brush my teeth. Like the second day
Damn.
they were here, it was just so much. So, anyways, yeah. Yeah, enough of that. How's your week? Now you're not at home.
I'm not. I am coming to y'all live from a hotel in Houston. So I will be speaking at the Harris County Systems of Care conference. It's a group through, I believe, Health and Human Services, that it's direct service providers, counselors, people that work in the community, and it's around youth. And so I will be sharing my youth experience in the system and the things that worked for me to help me stabilize. So it's one of my favorite presentations. So I'm looking forward to it. It was not a bad drive. It's not as far as Fort Worth, which was this weekend before the winter storm. I was able to go to Fort Worth area to visit Diane, someone that I did time with. She works at Lioness, and she was home visiting her dad, and we all had dinner. All of us did.
We did. That was a
The
fun
Lion
time.
King and the baby, and we met a wonderful waitress that I'm still waiting for her to contact us.
Why did we go to dinner and Toon immediately started flirting with the waitress? Toonchie.
That was Diane egging me on. Diane said, "What is your name? My friend is single." Like it was quickly out of my hands from everyone at the table, including Brittany. So
But she was a cutie
she was.
and a social worker.
Yes. So
Am I saying too much? I didn't say where we ate, so.
well, Grace, if you're watching, we did give you the contact information, so we're still waiting for the follow-up. Yeah, but it was good to see y'all. It was good to, of course, to see Diane. I only get to see her once a year. She lives in Germany. And yeah, that was
And
kind of
she brought German presents, so
yes.
chocolates and treats and, gifts, which she didn't have to do, but
She's
they
a gift
were
giver.
appreciated.
She's such a gift giver. She was putting together all the little stuff for you and Brittany, and her dad is so sweet, and her husband. It really was a nice time. I didn't get to stay because it was supposed to freeze, and I freak out on the weather. I do, and so I came home, and then I've just been sitting in front of the space heater with the cat with our Mean Girl blanket. It was cold. It was very cold.
Well, it finally, so Yeah, it finally defrosted today, but I guess I had been trying to turn on the water hose just because I'm letting the dogs out and then I just want them to have water when they go out to potty and have fresh water. And of course it wasn't coming on. It was froze, but it defrosted today and I guess I had turned it enough that it was on and I went back there and our whole back end of the house is just a big giant puddle and I'm like, oh, okay, so now tonight when it freezes we're gonna have this big
ice rink. Yeah.
Right. Eric, you can get Linus shirts through Chanel. She's a Linus member that has her own business that she makes t-shirts and the link is on our Facebook page on the Linus Facebook group.
And on the website, there's a way that you can order t-shirts and mugs.
Yes, thank you for that. I have to order a new mug because I broke mine.
What?
Yes. Yes, girl. Listen, I'm just lucky that I'm here and my computer still works. We're just going to go with it. Department of Corruption Stories. Thank you so much for your endless support. You are incredible and he is reminding us to please hit that like button, guys. Please comment and share this live. Also, if you are listening wherever you hear your favorite podcasts, please leave us a review. We appreciate you guys so much. I see you guys in the chat. I see you guys here before we even get started, and it just warms my heart so much. Yeah, thank you. You guys are definitely the highlight of our week. Let's talk about this. Let's get to it.
Tell people what happened.
Well, so basically what happened is, don't let me get this guy's name wrong. I cannot.
Boy.
Yeah, do not let me get his name. I'm looking at it. They found 215 bodies behind this jail in Mississippi, right? And the way that they discovered them is because, and I double checked his name, Dexter Wade. His mother, he went missing. He was 37 years old. Nobody had heard from him. His mother's like, my kid is missing. My son, this is not like him. She called me. No, she filed police reports. She put pleas on social media. This happened in March of 23. Okay, so March of last year, just recently, guys. Nothing. She's not finding him. As this investigation gets going, they discover that he is buried in basically a pauper's grave behind a jail in Mississippi. They were logged. Those bodies were logged and marked with a number. So they weren't like completely unmarked. But there were records, and there was record of him. When they found the records and exhumed his body, he had his wallet and his ID in his pocket, Toonchie. That it was not some case of John Doe. He was unidentifiable. And then further investigation led them to the fact that he was not incarcerated. He was out and got struck by an SUV driven by a Jackson police officer.
So he just got struck and killed and they just threw him in this grave.
They just freaked out, I'm sure. I'm sure. And it had to be, it couldn't have just been one officer. Like this took some logistics. This took several people. I hope.
Hey, I need to bury a body legitimately. To make it look legitimate, I need to bury a body in the pauper's grave that we have.
Yeah, exactly. Then as they keep exhuming bodies as they keep on their investigation, the count goes to 215. They start identifying, Dexter Wade's family is not the only family that didn't have a clue that their loved one has passed away. There were lots that just thought their loved one was still incarcerated. They had never been notified, never had been given the option to give their loved one a proper burial, none of that. And who knows? I've seen too much corruption inside of the prison system and jails, and to even, like, my mind immediately goes to, well, of course they didn't notify, they were hiding something. That's
Right.
My mind immediately goes to that.
Because why else would you not notify people?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because you're hiding something. So they have a famous civil rights attorney is representing these cases, and I hope that, I'm sure he's not going to stop. I hope that he just keeps pushing and people are held accountable. But as of right now, there's like no news about the officer that did the hit and run. There's no news about this. Is just kind of, there is news, but it's not everywhere. It's almost like it just goes with that generalized thinking that whatever happens to incarcerated people doesn't really matter.
Right. Like, oh, well, like,
right.
No sympathy or empathy for anything that happens to, and like you said, this gentleman, it sounds like he wasn't even processed through the jail. He was just hit.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That he was not incarcerated. He was a free person and just hit. Yeah. And his mother.
So, yeah. So moved, elevated past, hey, this person has died in custody. We're just going to call them, we'll log it, but we won't contact their family and we'll just bury them, and it's, the graveyard in Huntsville for the TDC, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. They call them, I don't know if it's politically correct or right to call it a pauper's grave, but the cemetery where they bury incarcerated people that have no one to claim their body. And let's be clear, they don't have a gravestone with their name. They have a little bitty plaque thing that has their TDCJ number. That's it. They're not labeled with anything else other than their corrections number. But there is probably not a great due diligence, but there is a process and a due diligence to try to reach out to someone who is related to this person to see if they want the remains. And if there's no one, then the last resort is to bury them there. But there's a process, right? You don't just, oh, this person's dead, I don't want to deal with the family, or I don't want to deal with the explanation or the questions, so let's just throw them in a grave and pretend like they never existed.
Right.
Like, what the hell?
Right. And so what are we seeing? Of course, these bodies are people of color predominantly, of course that there's just this devaluing of human life in this by so many people in this country that are in authority. It's frightening. It's frightening.
Well, it's going to get worse if the outcome of the election, and I'm not trying to polarize anybody. I respect everybody's political beliefs and religious beliefs, conservative, liberal. I do. I really don't ever want people to feel like they're not welcome because of their beliefs on any of that. My concern is the extreme polarization and the extreme radicalization, if that's the correct word, of a certain segment of our population that, quite frankly, has always been there, right? That's why these things happen and exist, because it feeds on what's already there. And we're going to see even more shocking things, not even just shocking things of the past that have been covered up, but they are going to be more and more in our face. And Marci, I think, when you said that, the story was out in the news and I saw it and you saw it, but we really pay attention to anything related to jails, prisons, anything, law enforcement. And it's the numbing. People hear all this stuff all the time and it's becoming normalized. That's the problem, is that this kind of stuff is becoming, that's bad. The callousness that we've developed as people is shocking.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying that there's not some big outcry when 215 bodies are found and families weren't notified. Yes, that's shocking to me. That's
because people don't understand that when it's happening to those people, right? It's happening to those formerly incarcerated, those incarcerated folks, or people of color, or the gays, or the women, or whatever. It's happening to them. It's not us. It's not me, right? Well, what happens is that when that continues to go on, it's normalized. Then eventually it will happen to that's why people don't understand this is an everyone problem. Abuses of power, it doesn't stop even if you think that you're a part of that power, or you're immune to it, or it would never happen to you. It will. If the police can abuse their power this way, what do people think?
Well, that's what they were confident. The Mrs. Jackson, Mississippi Police Department, the officers that were involved were confident enough to take him to a place where he was going to be logged in. You know what I mean? They were confident enough that they buried him with his identification in his pocket.
This is how little I care. I'm just going to bury this guy with his identity. I didn't even go through his pockets.
And then you work for the police department and you have a mother that's calling up there and crying out on social media for her missing son. And you know that he's in the ground. And this is who has authority. I mean, this is scary.
Yeah. And guess what? They, like you said, ain't nobody going to be held accountable. You know what? They're going to say, well, that's our pauper's grave. Mistakes were made. Moving on. Right? And everybody's going to be like, man, that's terrible. And these people's families are going to continue to, to try to raise their voice about it and try to get some acknowledgement. And then it just washes away in the news cycle, right? And people are like, man, that's messed up.
Toonchie, these folks are not able just to get their loved ones' bodies back. They have to provide a death certificate in order to get the body back. And that costs in their area $250. The family's having to pay just
to get the body.
Yeah. It's mind blowing. Like, they need to just be doing everything they can to appease these families. They need to be paying for $10,000 funerals. I don't know how much funerals cost, but I mean, they need to be dishing it out, literally, quite literally.
They're not going to do any of that. They're not going to do anything about it. They're going to continue. Maybe some policy will change on paper. Sorry, we don't know how this happened. It won't happen again. And it'll return to business as usual, and it reminds me so much of the little boys' graves in Gatesville. And we've talked about this on the show before. Gatesville is a the kind of birthplace in my mind of Texas youth injustice. This is where the state schools, which were reformatories for mainly boys of color, and they were really was really slavery, and it was work camps. And they were punished and beaten, and many of those boys died, and their families never knew what happened to them, and they were buried. And me and Marci have been there. We've had to pick grass around those markers, around the little stone wall around the cemetery, where they just buried boys that they killed, that died of sickness. And they just dumped them there and threw a brick on top of it with their, first name sketched on it, or their number. And that was it. And we all knew. That was the thing. Like, you and I weren't well educated about the history of youth justice in Texas, but we all knew that cemetery was full of boys that they had killed in the youth system. We all knew it. Everybody knew it. They didn't just die, peacefully because they had polio or something back in the day. This is where they dumped those kids. And it's still not really well talked about or documented. And they did it because they could. And, you tell people that history, they're like, oh, that's sad. And then that's just fucking okay. Well, people move on to something else. And I don't know this. I know what it meant. Let me say this. For me to be desensitized when I was younger from pain, from suffering, it's the only way I developed personality disorder. That's how I handle trauma the way that I do. But continuously desensitized. The things that I was capable of after that, Marci, were appalling, right? Because when you have no feelings left, you're capable of anything. And so when our country and our law enforcement and our people in authority are desensitized, like you said, where people are not even people, that they're just garbage to be thrown into a landfill. And I'm not talking about, at least when you're mad at each other, you're still people, right? But like, this is a whole nother level of, you are trash. You are trash to us.
I was just thinking about how that jail staff, it's just not a small operation.
Right.
It's not one or two people. It's an operation. Lots of people know about this. The people from the people that are locked up there live with that knowledge. The people that are digging those graves live with that knowledge. The people doing the light paperwork, the very minimal paperwork. I mean, it's just, how do you put a body in the ground and then just go home and sleep at night, not notifying anybody, these families? I would go berserk. Toonchie, I don't know how Dexter Wade's mother is handling it so well, because she's handling it beautifully. She's doing everything she can to spread awareness, which sadly is very minimal, the awareness. But I'm just thinking, if that was one of my kids, I just don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't even know to go looking for him and then find out that it was a police officer. At least if he was, and rest in peace, Dexter Wade. So I'm not going to refer to you, but at least if someone was found in a desert somewhere, you would think, okay, well, it was just something weird, something horrible happened. But no, this was a deliberate action by someone in authority, by several people in authority. I mean,
well, Marci, it goes to looking at the atrocities. You look at World War II, and I know people start getting funny when you start drawing parallels, because they get all weird and defensive or whatever. But when you look at how an entire nation, which spread, believed that other human beings were rodents, that they were not human, then you understand how they're able, right? When you have this mindset of the other, of subhuman, Well, I have the same emotion as I do throwing my trash in the dumpster. Taking this empty bottle and putting it in the trash can and throwing it. There's no thought or feeling. And when you are desensitized that far, all those people doing that, you're right. You're absolutely right. When things are systematic, people know. And some of the biggest atrocities, people knew there was a whole process to it, right? Well, that's just the way we've accepted it. This is what is, and this is our mindset too. And I'm sure that, I can imagine people who were incarcerated there or near there, they probably, girl, you better not, they'll throw you in that grave out there. Like, and because I can imagine that's how we would have handled it.
Yeah.
And it's, and it makes me think about the women when something bad would happen. And I would say, you guys, this is wrong. Well, Jennifer, that's how the way it is. Because it had always been, even though they knew it wasn't right, that's the way it always had been. And so they couldn't fathom or dream outside of that. And it's sad to me is that you're absolutely right. People know about this stuff and nothing happens, nothing changes. And I say this a lot. If you go to the core belief, and I say this about the kids in our juvenile system all the time, but it applies to adults too. We sit here and talk about policy. We sit here and talk about, oh, well, let's try staff raises and mental health supports and da, da, da. That's all great. But nobody has talked about what the real problem is. The real problem is y'all's belief about the children in this system. Because if you believed the same thing about these kids as you do, your daughter, then this would not happen. This wouldn't happen for over 100 years. The abuse, the atrocity, the little boys in their graves in Gatesville. It's because of the core belief about those children. That's the problem. And until that gets fixed, we're going to continue to see stuff like that. And I think it's only going to get worse with the rhetoric that we hear in our state, local, and national government. When you say we have to cleanse the nation of the people who are poisoning our blood as a nation, what in God's name? That should strike fear in every person's heart in this country. It should. And it's shit like this. I'm sorry, I get real cranked up about it because it's terrifying and it's real and it's only going to get worse. If we think our history and stuff like this has been bad, Marci, I worry about what's going to happen next in our face. Now it's not behind closed doors.
Well, that's exactly it's this story seems like it should have happened 100 years ago. Like that we have progressed as a nation and as humans, that our humanity has progressed. And the fact that these bodies are from 2016 and on to present day, or whenever the last body was, which was recently, that's frightening. That's terrifying. It's happening today. It's not like this gentleman that got hit by a police officer, that he was just thrown in these old graveyards, just hidden in an old. No, this was it. This is now. These people are from right now. And you made such a good point about the desensitizing, being desensitized. I'm just thinking back about being incarcerated, and yes, the ladies that had been there for years. I remember that first couple years being like, but wait, da 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 da, wait, they're, like I remember one time I was in panic mode because the water had been off and that we had porta potties, and they were writing disciplinary cases even for the disabled ladies in the dorm who could not get up. The porta potties are on a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
These ladies are on walkers. They are in wheelchairs. They cannot get in and out of that. And they were writing disciplinary cases, and everybody's like, "Yeah."
It's
I'm
just
like,
what it
"Yeah,
is. Yeah, right.
yeah." I mean, here I am trying to lift people up onto the trailer to go to the bathroom, risking a disciplinary case because I'm not
Mhm.
supposed to be touching them. I'm not sup you know? I mean, it just yeah, you're right. That is you people get used to seeing it every day, and then it's normal, and then they don't even realize it's not normal. And that's often like children that grow up in abuse. They don't realize that that's not happening in every home.
Yeah. I
Uh,
remember when and I may have told this story before too, so forgive me, but I remember at the early part of the pandemic, and Carrie Blakinger was posting things on Twitter about the gentleman's lawsuits at the unit. I don't, is it, it's not Polanski, it might be, but where the guys were disabled and they weren't given, they're vulnerable because their immune systems, their disabilities, and COVID, they're not having the things they need, right? Um, and so the warden in the, and of course, the courts ruled in favor of the prison and said they had done enough to protect them. And so one of the complaints was like, we don't even have janitors that can really clean the dorm, like to really sanitize the dorm. Um, Maybe we need trustees from other units to come, like able body. And I, by no means am I saying somebody with a disability cannot participate or have a job. That's not what I mean. The level of disability and functioning at this particular unit, these men needed help. They needed real assistance. They needed care attendants, really. And the warden said, Marci, well, the janitors that we have, using a particular incarcerated person as an example, he was in a wheelchair without one leg and without an arm. And he was able to hold the push broom, you know, the push brooms, remember them?
mhm.
Hold it with his shoulder, and that hold it with his shoulder, and push himself in the wheelchair with that other arm, and push the broom. And the lack of humanity in his statements in the court document, and the idea that that was good enough for an entire dorm, when the gentleman was saying, I can't do this and I'm not really being effective, I don't want to do this. I remember that tweet thinking, man, that's fucked up. Yeah, I mean, they do that. And I was reading through the comments on her Twitter post, and people were appalled. They were like, oh my God, what kind of insanity? And I told her later, I said, man, I almost had a panic attack, because it was the first moment, Marci, that I realized that I didn't even recognize that this was abnormal or not humane. I realized, man, that's fucked up, whatever, right? Because I too was desensitized, and it was so commonplace to be treated like that, that when we saw it, we developed an apathy, right? And I think apathy can be um, a trauma response, right? It's the different type of apathy that I think we're seeing when people are throwing people into graves, right? Their apathy comes from, they don't see that person as human. Our apathy sometimes comes from severe trauma. Like, I cannot continue to process my feelings about this. I have to shut it off. Um, but that was the first time I ever realized, oh my God, this isn't normal. This isn't normal to be treated this way.
That realization came from me coming home and sharing casual stories that I just thought were casual stories, like at the dinner table. I just remember a few very specific times where I said something at the dinner table, and my parents are there and my brother's there, and I say something and everybody just is quiet. And then my brother's like, "What the hell?" And my brother says, "Wait, they did what? Y'all couldn't do what?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And I just I didn't realize. And then it came even more going to my TikTok friends, going to events with them and their prison TikTokers who did time in all different states. And generally, when you're with a group of a bunch of people that did time, you don't hear a whole lot of shocking. Not a lot. There's not a lot that shocks you. Everything, we're all used to it. We've all witnessed it. We all lived it. And we're talking, and I would say something, and they're like, "What the hell? Wait." And I'm like, "Yeah, oh, Texas does that. They don't do that in California? Oh." "Oh, that's not how New York does things. Oh, okay." And so I just think there's just even a level, even a worse level for some of these southern states. And I will say, I want to bring it up because we talked about it. You touched a little bit about what happens in Texas when an incarcerated person passes away that doesn't have anybody to claim their body. And sometimes that happens, maybe their family can't afford even a burial. So it's not always that they're not loved, or and I'm not saying that others aren't loved. I'm saying it doesn't mean that they don't have a loved one on the outside. It just means maybe they don't have the ability to get their body, get their remains. But have read so much about the cemetery, and that TDCJ uses, and it's incarcerated men that work that cemetery. Yes. And I read one interview with one gentleman, and he just talked about how much he cared for his job, that he felt like he was doing a service, that they handled everything with care and compassion, and even would say a few words. And they were given that freedom to do that by the staff. And it just always surprises me when Texas maybe gets something right, especially TDCJ when they get something right. And I feel like that process, I've never heard horror stories in that aspect with the agency.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the incarcerated men are the ones that do the burials, and the thing for me is they're not they don't even get to die with their name on their little stone. Right. They die with their TDCJ number, and that's it. That's the only identification. Like, so for me, like, I appreciate that it's handled with care, right? But to me, that is another way to dehumanize, right? Like, you don't even get to die as a person. You're just a number. You're just a number with the state. And I think, and maybe that's something that I feel like that's an easy fix. Maybe if we elevated that, right? Like, to say, hey, this process of just labeling people in the pauper's field with just their TDCJ number, give them more dignity to put their name on it.
Right. It makes me wonder also, thinking about how Texas uses incarcerated people to handle the burials. I'm wondering, because I seriously doubt that that jail in Mississippi had someone on staff to dig. And I seriously doubt correction staff was out there digging a hole. I'm just wondering if it was incarcerated people that were handling that as well.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, you remember even during COVID, when COVID was, just starting in this country, and the trailers of people. Again, there may be some people here that don't believe that really happened, but trailers of bodies and the work that was being done at the hospital and the cities and the jail were all incarcerated people in local county jails, and they were handling with bare minimum PEP, right? Like, so that stuff is usually handled by incarcerated people.
Yeah. I'm just so blown away. I do have a video, but honestly, it's probably stuff that we've covered. I should go ahead and play it, and I'll stop it. It's short. This part, the part about the 215 is fairly short, so I won't play this whole thing, but
crazy things I've seen on TikTok today. 215 bodies were found behind a Jackson, Mississippi jail. The families of these people were not notified that they passed away. Based on the information that's out right now, we do not know how these people passed away, and their families have been looking for them for a while. They, didn't know where they were. So that means these families were probably calling the jail. They have not, talked to their loved ones in a while. And what was the jail telling them? That they were fine? There is evidence that the jail knew who the next of kin was. They just didn't notify them. And to top it all off, these families, once they have found out that their family members were passed away, they had to pay $250 for a death certificate. And some of the families couldn't afford it. And this was just so that they can get their family members out of there so they could have a proper burial or funeral or whatever they were going to have. I'm sure by now, if you're on TikTok, you've seen something about the Miami incident.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like sums it up. And what I found, like if you Google this, if you Google bodies found behind a Mississippi jail, a few news things come up and tons of social media. Like this is how the word's getting out is, and this is probably why some people hate TikTok, because it's all over TikTok, all over. I mean, video after video after video. I didn't post my video about it until yesterday because I've been busy with the kids, but mine is like the 99th or something. It's way down there.
Marci, in just the bare bones of the story here, sounds like a serial killer, right? Like this is the kind of stuff, I say that because I watched a documentary, I think it was on Gacy, horrifying. But these missing young men, their and they were just pulling out bodies out from under this guy's house. They're trying to identify it, and families have been calling the city and the police for years, and finally, and they still have a few that have remained unidentified. But it just reminds me of, my God, this is like, families looking for missing loved ones that are in underneath Gacy's house, right? Like it's oddly, frighteningly similar. It really is.
It absolutely is similar to that. I just can't, again, just going back to I'm just saying, Dexter Wade's mother and family, all of the families, our love and good energy is heading your way, like going straight to you, because I just cannot imagine if that were one of my people, one of my family members. And then can we point out that this wasn't a prison?
It was a jail.
It was a jail. Jails are full of people who have not been prosecuted. Jails have people in them, and prisons have some innocent people, but not near as many as jails have. Jail, you can get arrested with very little evidence. You can get arrested. I mean, golly, we're talking about people that, if you are a justice warrior in this country, then you believe people are innocent until proven guilty. These are innocent people in a jail waiting to go to trial, waiting to sign their plea deal, or sitting out traffic violations. Like, this is who's in county jails, people.
It's just like a serial killer, just killing folks and burying them in the backyard. And then people call in the house, Mr. Gacy, Mr. Donner, have you seen these people? No, I don't know where they're at all. And they're buried in the backyard, under the house.
And so you call the jail and say, yeah, hi, my name's Marci and my son is so-and-so. I haven't heard from him in a while. Is there somebody on the computer? Oh, let me check on that for you, ma'am. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, he's fine. I mean, what are they telling these families?
Yeah, but they're just, I guess they're saying he's here, and I'm not trying to be funny because they are there.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not giving you a wellness check. I don't know how, and especially a city of that size. If this was Russ County in East Texas, smaller than that, Panola, although those counties, they have their own frightening secrets out in the woods, trust me. But, again, they're small counties. I could see them getting away with this for so long because the little bitty counties don't have that much oversight. But we're talking about a big jail like that, like you said, like this is just common practice. Well, and Marci, again, when we talked about Plain State being such a horrible place to get strip searched at, right? It was for years. We're talking over 10 years, 15, 20 years, consistently getting strip searched that very horrific way that you described to the legislators. And I know that one woman in intake has not been there for 20 years. Maybe she has, but I don't think that she has. So what does that mean? That means that this has been trained and taught to every single person that comes through here.
Yes.
Just continuously training people through this process that is incorrect. So it could just be, and I don't want to say just be, but this has been going on. This person gets trained. Hey, somebody dies. We do X, Y, Z, boom, boom. That's it. And then becoming desensitized to it that, well, this is how we've always done. So-and-so is supposed to notify the family. So I just trust that they do. And we just bury them. You know what I mean?
The turnover rate in county jails is it's a lot. They don't staff at least in Texas, I know county jail staff, the pay is not great. The job it sucks. Let's just say it. It sucks to be a county jail guard. Probably pretty much sucks, right? The turnover rate. I mean, I was there for 8 months and I watched officers come and go. And I'm just thinking, weren't some of these officers going home thinking, yeah, there's a graveyard in the back of the jail? And they had this little marker. It had this little stick marker. It wasn't just they're seeing it happen. 215 in 7 years. That's a lot of bodies. That's a lot of deaths in one jail.
Well, and I suspect that most, if not all of them, I'm not saying anybody didn't die of natural causes, but like you said earlier, if you're not telling me something, that means there's a reason you're not telling me something. So y'all have killed, again, serial killer. Like y'all are killing people and burying them in your backyard because there is no rhyme or reason why you would not do your due diligence in letting family members know. Well, it's because we beat the crap out of him and caved his skull in. So let's bury him because, I mean, it's just shocking. It's just shocking.
And of course we've been in Texas prisons, but you know that it's very well widely known that a correctional officer can strike and do more with little to zero repercussions.
Right.
We've seen it time and time again, and it's so ingrained in that culture, in that prison culture. I remember one incident, a girl, there were 2 officers, and one of them, he was a cool dude. He was kind of younger. He was just he was one of those that I would say was just there to get his paycheck, and make sure everybody was safe. He wasn't trying to be overkill. He didn't talk down to us, but there was an incident involving a young lady. When her cell door got rolled, she had been arguing with a female officer, and they had been talking shit back and forth to one another. And so when the officer came to let her out for some appointment, the officer had her hand on the door. So then their officer in the picket rolls the door, and the girl came out and swung on her. And that officer immediately had the young girl down. But I watched this officer that I thought he's a pretty cool dude. Like, if
Mhm.
he's somebody that maybe if something really happened, I felt like maybe I could trust him. And I watched him go over and beat the hell out of that girl handcuffed on the ground. This grown man just it just was his it's so ingrained in that culture that
Yeah.
he didn't think squat about it. And of course nothing happened.
Right.
Nothing happened.
Of course, because it's her fault, right, that she swung. Never mind the antagonist, being antagonized and shit thrown in your face and all the horrific things that they say to us till you explode. It's called reactive abuse. Any of you who's in therapy and you want to learn more about why borderline personality disordered people explode in rage, it's because it's called reactive abuse. It's a reaction, and they would do that, antagonize us until we popped. And, a lot of people can say, well, that's what self control is. Well, okay. If you really understood the type of how much more can I take until I lose it, till I pop, but that is the mentality. That is the mentality. And that is power corrupts, Marci. And, again, we're seeing that everywhere, right? And it's never thought we'd see it in our country, but it's always been that way. It's just been hidden, and now it's not. And and there's no way around it. There's a good little independent film based off a real experiment. It's called the Stafford Prison Experiment. The movie was actually very good. It was a little slow at first, but it starts to demonstrate. And if anybody doesn't know about this, it was a real experiment that they wanted to test to see what people would do if they would naturally abuse power, and how people work in that dynamic. So they took college students and assigned them roles, and they blocked off, I don't know if it was the English department or the psych department for a week or a weekend or the holidays or something where people weren't going to be in the building. And they made it a mini prison, a mini jail. And they had these guys, these college kids were the guards, and these were the incarcerated people. And how it naturally developed, it was shocking. And so he ended the experiment after, I think, 2 or 3 days, because it was so toxic and bad. Like, they had immediately assumed roles, right? And they had no reason as pretend prison guards, but it was this natural inclination to abuse power. And that's a real thing.
I remember telling people, or people, as I became one of the old schools in the penitentiary and had been there for years, and people coming into the system saying, yeah, well, they can't do da da da. Well, they can't do that. They can't do this. They can't do that. And I remember looking at these people and saying, honey, they can do whatever the hell they want to do. And they will.
Yeah. And they will.
They don't, it doesn't matter. You're right that policy says they're not supposed to do this. You're right that there are laws in this state and in this country that say they're not supposed to do this. But please don't go to prison under the impression that they can't or they won't do things because of policy or laws, because that's just not the way it is in there.
Marci, excellent point. Lori, the name of that is the Stanford Prison Experiment. I believe that's the name of it. You can find it on usually any of the streaming platforms. But you're right. And I just told Serena that the other day when she was like, well, the girls did this and they're not supposed to do that. And I said, stop. And I'm all for one of writing grievances and doing my part. But I pick my battles when I was in the inside, I picked my battles very carefully. And you learn how to do this, especially as women, very covertly and very strategic. I said, but Serena, you need to understand something. Remove from your mind that they can't. They can do anything they want. My father told me that the moment I got locked up. He said, please. And he always got nervous with any of my advocacy, even now, and I'm off paper. Jennifer, they can do whatever whatever they want, and you have no power. No power. I have my internal power, but you have no power. They have all of it. And let's hope and we pray and we navigate it, within the bounds of them using that power appropriately. But quite frankly, just know they can and do and will do whatever they damn well please. And we are at their mercy. We are. And laws, I heard one of I don't remember what scholar it was talking about the law restrains human instinct, right? But if you took law away, if you took that balance away, people will do anything, right? Like it is an instinct that we still have to work on as human beings to elevate ourselves to another plane of being more evolved, so that we don't rely on power and animalistic violence. But it's there, and it certainly comes out when there's an imbalance of power.
This, first of all, my iWatch just told me that my heart rate was elevated reading the comment. Because I'm feeling it. I'm remembering some very real instances where I felt in danger by male correctional staff. And this is Bo Gutierrez. I did time with Bo on the Murray unit, and Bo says, I was a janitor in my dorm, and this buff guard all of a sudden got upset at something that wasn't done to his standards and wanted to box. And that's real. That's real. Male officers, not only that are in authority and are armed with whatever pepper spray, mace, whatever they have, and a radio, they do give that threat, and they do. I don't know, but you're right. I just think it's just this prison culture that incarcerated people are not people, when in fact we know that they are mothers and children and siblings and spouses, and they are just people that either got caught up in something wrong or made a bad decision. It's not, they're not to be thrown away like these, right. like in Mississippi, they have done. They have quite literally just thrown them away, 215. And yeah, and you're right. Department of Corruption made a comment a little bit ago about that. Oftentimes the news outlets don't even pick it up because it's just getting so common that they don't pick it up. And that's why it's our job to have these kind of conversations. Even if you're not on social media, you can share posts that talk about things that you're concerned about. That's a way to spread awareness and talking about it within your community. We are at our hour, Toonchie. Any final thoughts?
Well, I love the discussion to shine the light on the issue, but I also love that it takes us into other areas about self-reflection and just thinking about all the violence done to us and reflecting on all the ways, because I'm still working on this in therapy and within myself, of all the ways that I have become those very things that have happened to me, the violence that I've put in the world, the ways that I respond that are heartless or mirroring that, right? Like we become the very thing that we fear and hate. And it's such a weird place to be in when we have these discussions. And I'm like, yeah, God, the violence and then looking within myself, and I'm like, something clicks in me that I respond the same way. And I don't know if that's again my mental health or what the system taught me, what my family structures, maybe all of it, right? And just trying to healing that in the world. I hope that at the same time it heals that within ourselves, right? Because it is such a strange feeling or reflection or awareness. I don't know. And maybe that was too deep for that moment that you just asked me, but that's what I was thinking.
I'm with it. We're here for it, Toonchie. I appreciate that. We appreciate everybody that's been in this comment section. And Tona, we see you, sister. We love you. My heart is a little heavy from this discussion. And so I encourage everybody that maybe felt a little bit of trauma to just process that and give yourself the same grace that you would give someone else. I have to tell myself that all the time, give yourself grace. And I know this was kind of heavy, and it just made me think about a lot of bad things that happened. So, we love you all, guys. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for hitting the like and share button and all of that good things. Thank you for listening wherever you're listening from. We appreciate you all. We will be here the same time, the same place next week. We are right here live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast. Thank y'all for hanging out with us on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast with Marci Marie and Toonchie. Make sure and subscribe to our channels